I really want to spend this hour, or at least the first part of it, translating Donald Trump from Republican to plain English. Republicans have used a very special and unique language for the last 40 years, ever since the Reagan era. And many of them used it long before that, but the Reagan administration really refined this so that they say something that the average American voter thinks they understand, but it means something completely different. And so I'm going to go through, Trump gave a speech off a teleprompter on Saturday in Iowa. I watched the whole thing. I did it so you don't have to. And I want to share some clips with you from this, and I'm going to translate them into English. So we start out with Trump. I labeled this Populism 101. And it's really, this is Donald Trump basically getting the attention of the audience and making vague promises that have absolutely no specifics whatsoever, but sound really cool. Here he is.
Our campaign is about protecting those who have no power. They don't have power, but they're great, great people. They are great people without power. We're going to change that. They'll be great. They will be great people with power. Together, we're going to work. We're going to give working people a voice for the first time in many, many decades. They haven't had a voice in a long time.
Unless, of course, they have a union. But he's not talking about that because he hates unions. You see, he's basically saying, I'm here for you. I'm going to give the power to you. Of course, he has no such intention. Republicans never do. You know, the simplest way to give power to working people is to encourage unionization, right? Now, let's have card check. Let's have the Employee Free Choice Act. But, oh, no, Republicans would never do that. So that's number one. Here's number two. This is to tell you what's actually being, I'm going to tell you what's being said in advance, and then you can hear Trump say it. The Republicans for forever have operated on this philosophy that anything that government does that could be done by the private sector to make a buck for one of their billionaire buddies who could recycle some of that money back into the political campaigns of the Republicans should be privatized. And the Veterans Administration is at the top of that list. Now, the VA, it's had some problems. I mean, this is one of the reasons that Bernie Sanders and John McCain spent a year putting together an $18 billion improvement, transformation, change, and some real significant changes, including a system where veterans who are far away from veterans hospitals can use local facilities. And this was not a step toward privatization. But giving veterans vouchers instead of having VA hospitals and then starting to close down the VA hospitals around the country, you know, step by step. Same, you know, just like, you know, Scott Walker or Rick Scott or whoever, you know, and Pat McCrory shutting down the driver's license bureaus right after they say you've got to have a driver's license if you want to vote. Shutting down these VA offices, and now you've got your voucher. Hey, good luck. This is how the Veterans Administration gets privatized. So here's Donald Trump saying, but of course not saying, I'm going to privatize the VA.
Let's talk about what it all means. For our veterans, it means a guarantee that they can seek medical care at either a VA facility or at a private medical doctor with us paying the cost.
Right. See, that's already the case as a result of these reforms from last year. So why is he saying this? Because they're going to take it to the next step. This is the privatization. Now, this is the third one. And this, in my setup for this is from the Economic Policy Institute earlier this month, EPI, you know, very well-respected website and group and think tank and whatnot. And they concluded that the recovery since 2009, this is since the Great Bush crash, the Bush Great Depression, the recovery since 2009 has been historically slow, and the disappointing pace can be explained entirely by the fiscal austerity imposed by Republicans in Congress. And then they graph recoveries from the crash of 1992, which was Reagan, the crash from the recovery and the crash, the recovery of 2001, which was Bush the second, and the crash and the recovery from the crash of 1991, which was Bush Sr. In 92, federal spending, when the crash happened, It went up over 20%. Federal spending went up over 20% by Reagan, right, during Reagan. In other words, they jacked federal spending massively to get out of the recession of 82. In 2001, federal spending, this is Bush Jr., federal spending went up by about 10%. 10% is massive when you're talking about a couple $1 trillion budget. Went up about 10% under George W. Bush in order to get us out of that recession. In 1991, Bush the elder, spending went up about 16%, 17%. Federal spending went up in order to get us out of that recession. In 2009, federal spending right now is about 8% below where it was at the beginning of the crash of the business cycle. It's below where it was. So they say, had government spending during Obama's tenure behaved the same way it did during Reagan's, government spending would currently be roughly $1 trillion higher than it is. Since the stimulus ended, the kind of good jobs that come from construction or public investment and are readily available to Americans who don't have college degrees have dried up purposely. Republicans have shifted hard to austerity following the worst fiscal crisis in 70 years to deny President Obama. Now, this is a commentary by Lal Gop at Eclecta blog. Republicans have shifted hard to austerity following the worst financial crisis in 70 years to deny President Obama the sort of economic boost most presidents take for granted. They've done it to increase economic anxiety, which they know will increase resentment of all sorts, including the racial resentment that has driven much of the resistance to Obama. Okay, so when Republicans complain about the economy, they're bragging about their own accomplishments. So here is Donald Trump, this is bragging about the state of the economy.
At the center of our change, and this is a change agenda, is also a plan to fix our rigged economy. It's rigged. The government just revised the growth numbers. You probably saw yesterday, it was a big story. We had horrible growth numbers. They were announced last month. They made a mistake. They just announced that the number that was announced that was so bad was too high, and it had to be readjusted downward, down to 1.1%. Just so you understand, if China drops down to 8% GDP or 9% GDP, it's a major catastrophe, and the same with other countries. And they do things that you don't want to know about, but they make it impossible for your businesses to compete. But they consider it a catastrophe. Here we are with no growth, 1.1%, which is no growth. And we have the same leaders that are incompetent and don't know what they're doing, but we're going to make a change.
Actually, those leaders, the people who run the House and the Senate, who define the budget, are not incompetent. They're very good at what they do, and they know exactly what they're doing, and they're trying to stick it to President Obama. It's the Republicans in the House and the Republicans in the Senate with the austerity and cutting budgets and, federal, as I said, federal spending is down. The number of federal employees is actually down since Obama took office. And one consequence of that is that it actually shrinks the economy. It decreases the size and strength of our economy. So here is Donald Trump bragging about the Republican accomplishment of the last 8 years, let's say roughly, of preventing President Obama from having the same kind of recovery that Bush Jr. had, that Bush Sr. had, and that Reagan had in every single case as a result of massive government spending stimulus that brought the economy back. Okay, we are translating Republican speak coming via teleprompter out of Donald Trump's mouth. Now, he now has actual Republican operatives writing his speeches. And he is now starting to speak the way that George W. Bush spoke, the way that Bush Sr. spoke, the way that Ronald Reagan spoke, in Republican speak. And I am, as a public service, translating this into English. The next one is the Environmental Protection Agency. The big funders, in particular the Koch Industries and the Koch brothers, but there are many others, ExxonMobil, just a whole bunch of big companies, particularly the resource extraction companies, the coal companies, the power companies that have these giant pits and piles of coal fly ash, and all the poisonous industries, the chemical industry, all of them want regulations that prevent them from poisoning our air and water to be diminished so they can be more profitable. I mean, companies were far more profitable, Dow and Hooker and all these other companies, far more profitable back in the early 60s when they were able to dump so much poison into Lake Erie that not only did the entire lake die, but the Cuyahoga River that empties into it caught on fire. So, you know, they want to cut the regulations. So how do you cut regulations? You put it in the context of something that we all love, family farms. Family farmers, oh my God, they're being screwed by regulations. Are they? Not that I know of, unless they really want to do nasty stuff. But see if you can get a deregulatory agenda going. You know, hey, welcome to poisoned air and poisoned water. Here's Donald Trump talking about how he's going to use the excuse of family farmers to destroy the EPA.
We are going to end the EPA intrusion into your family homes and into your family farms for no reason. What they're doing to you is a disgrace. We're going to get rid of a lot of those regulations that don't mean anything except cost you a lot of money and a lot of time, and in many cases you lose your farms over the regulations.
Right, and everybody's applauding and all this kind of stuff, and anyhow. And then next, he wants to cut the business tax rate, which is currently at 35%, although the average effective tax rate, in other words, the tax rate that big corporations in America, or all corporations in America, actually pay is around 17% right now, right this minute. But he's going to cut it down to 15%, right? So that, you know, all the big billionaires and all the big corporations in America do just great. Factory farms are not paying the 35%. I mean, pretty much nobody's paying 35%, but you'd have to have millions of dollars in profits. A family farm, a factory farm might have that, but a family farm doesn't have millions of dollars in profit. Family farms are lucky to break even. Family farms are probably paying 2, 3, 5, 10%. I mean, you know, it depends on the farm. It depends on how much money they're making. But anyhow, he's going to use that as the excuse to cut taxes to 15%. And again, deregulate. And deregulate means let's deregulate the banks. Let's deregulate Koch Industries. Let's deregulate ExxonMobil. Let's deregulate, the coal company. Everybody. Here's Donald Trump saying, you know, using, again, family farms as the scam to pitch tax cuts and deregulation.
We are going to reduce taxes from 35% to 15%. And the thing that most surprised me is in going around all over the country and talking about that massive tax cut, and also for the middle class, but the massive small business and business tax cut, or the reduction by a lot of regulations, 100% of the people I talk to feel more strongly about the regulations. And who would have thought about that? Who would have thought that could happen? But they feel more strongly about getting rid of these horrible, really horrible regulations, and that's what we're going to do.
And I'm sure he's probably actually telling the truth here, which is, you know, I realize unusual for Donald Trump. Actually, he's probably not telling the truth. I doubt 100% of people who talk to him have said, Donald, please deregulate the environment. Please deregulate. You know, I just I'm so tired of breathing clean air. I'm so tired of the water coming out of the tap in my sink being safe to drink. Oh, my God, please deregulate these people. But the fact of the matter is that this is the sales pitch that he's using. This, what you're hearing here, what's behind Donald Trump, what's behind the Republican Party are these giant multinational corporations, the polluting industries in particular. Saw a news story over the weekend that said 90 corporations are responsible for most of the carbon pollution in our world. I mean, which is pretty mind-boggling, although a lot of them were like ExxonMobil kind of companies that they're not actually producing the pollution. They're producing the gasoline that we burn, which produces the pollution. I mean, they're actually producing pollution as well. So this is Donald Trump, again, using family farms to pitch this thing. We've got some more. I'll share them with you right after the break. And so stick around. We are translating GOP, Republican speak, Trumpism. These are really not so much Trumpisms, though. Republican speak into plain English.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program.